The clinking of glasses and the low hum of cheerful conversation should have been a symphony to my ears. It was, after all, a wedding, a celebration of love, a beginning. But all I could hear was the frantic, panicked thumping of my own heart, a frantic drumbeat against my ribs. The ballroom, with its glittering chandeliers and cascades of white roses, felt less like a fairy tale, and more like a beautifully decorated cage. I smoothed down the silk of my dress, a deep emerald green that Mark had said made my eyes look like jewels. Now, the compliment felt like a relic from another lifetime, something said by a man I used to know. We were seated at the main table, a place of honor, next to the happy couple, my cousin Sarah and her new husband. Mark, my husband of 5 years, was beside me. To anyone looking, we were the perfect picture. A handsome couple, smiling, raising our glasses for toasts. But a crack had just appeared in our carefully constructed portrait, a fissure so deep I feared we would shatter entirely. It started subtly, a ghost from the past materializing in the crowd. I saw her first, Chloe. It was impossible to miss her. She moved with an easy, confident grace that always made me feel clumsy and oversized. Her laughter, a light musical sound, drifted over from a nearby table. She was stunning, wrapped in a dress the color of champagne, her blonde hair catching the light like a halo. I felt a familiar, unwelcome pang of insecurity. It was a feeling I had worked hard to bury, a ghost I thought had been long exorcised from our marriage. Mark's gaze followed mine, and his breath hitched. It was a tiny sound, almost imperceptible, but to me it was a thunderclap. His smile, which had been fixed and polite all evening, suddenly became genuine. His eyes, which had glazed over during the speeches, were now sharp and focused. They were fixed on Chloe. "Wow," he murmured, his voice low, meant only for me. "Chloe's here. She looks incredible." I tried to keep my own smile from faltering. "She does. She looks very happy." I hoped my voice sounded light, unbothered. But Mark wasn't listening. He was lost, captivated by the vision across the room. He leaned in closer to me, his breath warm against my ear, and whispered the words that would echo in my mind for the rest of the night. "She's even prettier than I remember." The air left my lungs in a silent rush. It wasn't just the words themselves, but the tone. It was filled with a sense of awe, a deep, wistful longing that had no place at a wedding, and certainly not in a whisper from a husband to his wife. It was a confession, a comparison. And in that comparison, I was the one who had been found wanting. My own reflection in the polished surface of a silver platter on the table seemed to mock me. My dark hair, my carefully applied makeup, the emerald green dress, it all felt like a costume, a poor imitation of the woman he truly admired. The cheerful noise of the reception faded into a dull roar. I felt 100 pairs of eyes on me, even though I knew no one had heard him. The shame and hurt were so potent, so overwhelming, it felt like a physical weight pressing down on me. I wanted to disappear, to run from the ballroom, from the pitying looks I imagined, from the ghost of my husband's past, and the sudden, chilling ghost of my marriage's future. I took a slow, deliberate sip of water, the cold glass a small, solid anchor in the swirling chaos of my emotions. He said it so casually, so thoughtlessly, as if commenting on the weather. He had no idea he had just detonated a bomb in the quiet landscape of my heart. He turned back to me, his eyes still shining from the memory of her, completely oblivious to the devastation he had just caused. "Are you all right, Grace? You've gone quiet." "I'm fine," I lied, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. I offered him a smile so fragile I was afraid it would shatter on my lips. "Just a little tired, I suppose. It's been a long day." Mark accepted the excuse without a second glance. He was already turning his attention back to the newlyweds, laughing at something the groom said. He was there, beside me, but he was a million miles away, lost in a memory that didn't include me. The casual cruelty of his obliviousness was a second wound, deeper than the first. For him, that comment was a passing cloud. For me, it was the beginning of a storm that was threatening to drown me. My mind raced back through the 5 years of our marriage. Had he always felt this way? I thought of all the times he'd told me I was beautiful, the quiet moments of intimacy, the promises of a shared future. Did they all have an invisible asterisk? A silent clause that read, "But not as beautiful as Chloe." I had always known about Chloe. She was the great, tragic love of his college years, the one who, according to his own telling, had broken his heart. When we started dating, he assured me she was a closed chapter, a ghost of the past. "You're my present and my future, Grace," he had said, holding my face in his hands. "There is no one else." I had believed him. I had built the foundations of our life on that belief. But now, the ground beneath me felt unstable, threatening to crumble. I looked at him again. Really looked at him. He was stirring the ice in his drink with a plastic straw. His brow furrowed slightly in thought. He wasn't even looking at her anymore. He didn't have to. She was already in his head. It was then that the master of ceremonies, a cheerful man with a booming voice, stepped up to the microphone again. And now, folks, we'd like to open the floor. If there's anyone who wants to share a special memory or give a toast to our wonderful couple, Sarah and Ben, now's your chance. A few people laughed and clapped. A hand shot up at a table in the back. My heart was still hammering, but a strange, cold calm began to settle over me. It started as a whisper in the back of my mind. A reckless, terrifying idea. Say something. What would I even say? Would I stand up and announce my husband's careless betrayal to a room full of our friends and family? No, that wasn't my style. That would be a scene. A moment of messy, unrestrained anger. But silence. Silence felt like acceptance. It felt like agreeing with his casual assessment. It felt like admitting that yes, I was the lesser. The runner-up. The consolation prize. And in that moment, something inside me hardened. I would not be that woman. I had my own voice, my own story, and my own worth, which was not dependent on his or any other man's approval. The hurt was still there, a raw, open wound. But beneath it, a different feeling began to bloom. Resolve. I decided I would give a toast. Not a toast of anger or revenge, but a toast about love. Real love. The kind that isn't just about beauty or remembered perfection, but about showing up day after day. The kind that weathers storms, the kind that feels safe and true. The kind that I thought Mark and I had, and perhaps the kind my cousin Sarah and her new husband were just beginning. My hand trembled as I reached for my champagne flute. Mark noticed the movement, his focus finally snapping back to me. "What are you doing?" he whispered, a hint of confusion in his voice. I didn't answer. I pushed my chair back, the sound scraping loudly in a momentary lull. I stood up. The room was a blur of faces, but my path felt clear. I walked the few steps to the microphone that had been left on a stand near our table. I could feel Mark's bewildered stare on my back. I could feel Chloe's curious gaze from across the room. I took a deep breath, my fingers wrapping around the cool metal of the microphone stand. I was terrified, but I was also, for the first time all night, starting to feel a flicker of my own power. I tapped the microphone lightly, and the soft thump-thump sound drew the remaining wandering eyes in the ballroom toward me. The silence that followed was heavy, expectant. I could feel Mark's gaze burning into my side, a mixture of shock and dawning horror. I didn't look at him. I couldn't. Instead, I found my cousin Sarah's eyes across the table. Her smile was warm and encouraging, though tinged with surprise. I held her gaze, using it as my anchor. "Hello, everyone," I began, my voice clearer and stronger than I expected. "For those of you who don't know me, I'm Grace, Sarah's cousin, and I'm Mark's wife." I let that last phrase hang in the air for just a moment, a simple statement of fact that suddenly felt loaded with 1,000 unsaid things. I raised my glass. "Sarah, Ben, I look at you both tonight, and I see so much joy, so much hope. Your love is so new and bright. It practically sparkles." A gentle wave of laughter rippled through the room. I smiled, a real smile this time. People talk a lot about love at weddings. They talk about finding the one, about soulmates, about that first moment you see someone and your world just stops. My eyes flickered, almost involuntarily, toward Chloe's table. She was watching me intently, her head tilted. Then I looked at Mark. His face had gone pale. The casual, easy smile was gone, replaced by a tense, rigid line. He knew. He knew this wasn't just a toast. "But I've been thinking," I continued, my voice dropping a little lower, drawing the audience in. "That first spark is a wonderful thing. It's exciting. It's beautiful. It's often what we remember most vividly. The beauty that first captivates us. The perfect image we hold in our minds." The room was utterly still now. The clinking of cutlery had stopped. The whispers had ceased. It was just my voice, weaving through the silent air. But that's not the love that lasts. That's not the love that builds a life. The love that lasts is what happens after the sparkle fades into a steady, warm glow. It's not about who is the prettiest person in the room. It's not about comparing what you have to a memory of what you once had. A collective intake of breath seemed to move through the room, as if everyone suddenly understood the undercurrent of my words. I saw Mark's hand tremble where it rested on the white tablecloth. He slowly, deliberately, lowered his eyes, unable to meet my gaze. Real love, I said, my voice thick with emotion but unwavering, is about the person who sees you when you're not beautiful, the person who holds your hand when you're sick, who knows your fears, who celebrates your small, unglamorous victories. It's about choosing to see the beauty in the person right in front of you, day after day, not because they are a perfect, unchanging portrait, but because they are real. They are your partner. Their beauty is in their strength, their kindness, their courage. It's a beauty that grows over time, that you earn the right to see. I turned my body slightly, finally looking directly at Mark. His face was a mask of shame and regret. He looked up and met my eyes, and in their depths, I saw the full weight of his careless words finally crash down upon him. He looked broken. So, to Sarah and Ben, I concluded, raising my glass high, my hand no longer shaking. I wish for you more than just a lifetime of sparks. I wish for you a lifetime of the quiet, steady glow. May you always choose to see the growing, changing, and ever-deepening beauty in each other. May your love be real, be present, and be more than enough. Cheers. I took a sip of my champagne, and as I lowered my glass, the room fell completely silent. No one clapped, no one spoke. It was a silence so profound, so heavy with meaning, that it felt louder than any applause. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. In that cavernous, silent ballroom, every unsaid word, every shared glance was amplified. I walked back to my chair with measured steps, my back straight, my chin held high, though inside I felt like I was wading through deep water. I sat down, deliberately not looking at Mark, and placed my champagne flute on the table with a soft click that sounded like a gavel. Then one person started to clap. It was Sarah. She was on her feet, her eyes shining with unshed tears, her applause not loud and boisterous, but slow, intentional, and full of meaning. Ben stood with her, joining in. Then another person, an old aunt of ours, and then another. Soon the entire room, with the exception of our table, had risen to their feet, filling the hall with a wave of applause that was less about celebration and more about solidarity. It was a sound of understanding, of respect. They weren't just clapping for a toast. They were clapping for me. I offered a small, grateful nod to the room, a lump forming in my throat. It was a deeply surreal moment. I had laid my heart bare, exposed the cracks in my marriage to a room of 200 people, and instead of judgment, I was met with a quiet, powerful wave of support. Beside me, Mark remained seated, frozen. He looked like a statue carved from regret. He didn't clap. He didn't move. He just stared at the centerpiece of white roses, his knuckles white where he gripped the stem of his own glass. The applause eventually faded, and the master of ceremonies, looking visibly flustered, quickly announced it was time for the bride and groom to cut the cake. The music swelled, a cheerful, upbeat tune that felt jarringly out of place. The spell was broken. Guests began to murmur, to move, to head toward the dance floor or the cake table. The party was trying to stitch itself back together, but the tear I had made was too clean, too precise. People would glance at our table, their eyes full of pity, curiosity, or admiration, before quickly looking away. We were now the central drama, an uncomfortable spectacle that had upstaged the main event. I risked a glance at Chloe. She was no longer smiling. Her face was pale and she was whispering something to the man sitting next to her. She looked over at our table, her eyes meeting mine for a brief, unreadable second before she looked down at her lap, a flush creeping up her neck. Whether it was from shame or embarrassment, I couldn't tell, but the halo I had imagined around her earlier was gone. She just looked like a woman caught in the crossfire of a life she had long since left behind. Mark finally turned to me. His voice was a raw, choked whisper. "Grace, why?" I met his gaze, my own eyes cold. "Why what, Mark? Why did I give a toast? Or why did I tell the truth?" He had no answer. He just shook his head, a look of utter defeat on his face. The rest of the evening passed in a torturous blur. We sat through the cake cutting, the first dance, the bouquet toss. We smiled when people spoke to us, but the space between us was a frozen wasteland. The air was so thick with unspoken words it felt hard to breathe. I felt no triumph, no satisfaction, just a profound and hollow sadness for the man I thought I had married, and for the marriage I thought we had. Finally, after what felt like a lifetime, we made our excuses. We said our goodbyes to Sarah and Ben, a hug from my cousin conveying everything she couldn't say out loud. The car ride home was a symphony of silence. The city lights blurred past the window, streaks of color in the darkness. Mark drove, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly it looked like he was trying to choke it. I stared straight ahead, replaying the night over and over in my mind. The whisper in my ear, the toast, the silence, the applause. Each memory was a stone I turned over and over, examining its sharp edges. When we finally pulled into our driveway, he shut off the engine, but neither of us moved. The darkness of the garage enveloped us. This was it. The public performance was over. The private reckoning was about to begin. "I'm sorry," Mark finally whispered into the suffocating silence of the garage. The words sounded small, inadequate. "Grace, I am so sorry." I turned my head slowly to look at him. In the faint light filtering in from the street, his face was etched with misery. "Sorry for what, Mark?" I asked, my voice devoid of emotion. I needed to hear him say it. I needed to know if he understood the depth of what he had done. "Are you sorry you said it? Or are you sorry that I heard you?" He flinched as if I had struck him. "That's not fair." "Fair?" I let out a short, bitter laugh that sounded harsh in the enclosed space. "You want to talk about fair? Nothing about tonight was fair. It wasn't fair that you made me feel like a second choice at my own cousin's wedding. It wasn't fair that you looked at another woman with more admiration than you've looked at me in years. And it wasn't fair that you said what you said. It was cruel. I didn't mean it to be cruel," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "It just came out. It was a stupid, thoughtless comment. A mistake." "A mistake," I echoed, my voice rising. "A mistake is spilling wine on the carpet, Mark. A mistake is forgetting to take out the trash. This wasn't a mistake. This was a window. You let me see what you truly think. That after 5 years of marriage, after everything we've built, you still see her as the benchmark. The gold standard of beauty that I, and apparently our life together, can't quite live up to." We got out of the car and walked into the quiet house. Our home. Every picture on the wall, every piece of furniture we'd picked out together, felt like a prop from a play about a happy couple. A play that had just ended. I dropped my keys on the hall table, the metallic clatter echoing the turmoil inside me. Mark followed me into the living room, his steps hesitant. "It's not like that, Grace. I love you. You know I love you." "Do I?" I spun around to face him. "Because love isn't supposed to feel like this. It's not supposed to feel like a competition I've already lost. I have spent years feeling like I was living in the shadow of a ghost. Your perfect, heartbroken memory of Chloe. I always told myself I was being paranoid, that I was insecure. You told me that too. You told me it was all in my head. But tonight you proved me right. All my worst fears, all my deepest insecurities, you confirmed them all with a single whisper." Tears began to stream down my face, hot and fast. They weren't just tears for the hurt of tonight, but for all the small moments of doubt, all the times I had pushed aside an uneasy feeling for the sake of our peace. "I didn't even know she was going to be there," he said, running a hand through his hair in desperation. "Seeing her was a shock. It was like seeing a ghost, just like you said. And I just spoke without thinking." "But you did think it, Mark," I countered, my voice breaking. "That's the part that I can't get out of my head. The thought was there. You saw her and you saw me and you made a comparison. And I came up short. That's the truth, isn't it?" He stared at me, his own eyes filling with tears. He opened his mouth to speak, then closed it again. The silence was his answer. He couldn't deny it. He couldn't lie. Not now. The raw, painful truth was finally laid bare between us. The thought had been there. The comparison had been made. I sank onto the sofa, the fight suddenly draining out of me, replaced by a vast, cold emptiness. "I don't know what to do with that truth, Mark," I whispered, wrapping my arms around myself. "I don't know how we come back from this. How am I ever supposed to believe you when you tell me I'm beautiful again? How can I ever feel secure with you, knowing that a part of you is still holding on to her?" He knelt on the floor in front of me, taking my hands in his. They were cold as ice. "We work through it," he said, his voice thick with unshed tears. "Please, Grace, don't let one stupid, horrible moment ruin everything we have. Let me fix this. Let me prove to you that you're wrong. You're not second best. You're everything to me." I was a fool. I looked down at our joined hands, at this man I had loved and built a life with. I could see the sincerity in his eyes, the desperate plea for forgiveness. But something inside me had fundamentally shifted, the trust I had placed in him. the very foundation of our marriage, had been fractured. A vase that has been shattered might be glued back together, but the cracks will always be visible. I need time, I said, my voice barely audible. I need space. I don't want you to stay here tonight. The request hung in the air between us, a final, insurmountable wall. Mark didn't argue. He didn't plead anymore. He simply nodded, his shoulders slumping in utter defeat. The fight was gone, leaving only a hollowed-out man kneeling on our living room floor. He rose slowly, his movements stiff and weary, as if he had aged a decade in the last few hours. "Okay," he said, his voice raspy. "Okay, Grace." I watched, numb, as he walked back to the hall, picked up his car keys from the table where I had dropped them, and headed for the door. He paused with his hand on the doorknob, his back to me. "I love you," he whispered to the closed door. "Even if you can't believe it right now, it's the truest thing I know." And then he was gone, the quiet click of the lock sealing me into the silence of our home. I didn't cry. Not at first. I sat on the sofa for a long time, the house unnervingly still around me. The life we had built together seemed to mock me from every corner. The framed photo on the mantelpiece from our honeymoon in Italy, two smiling, sun-kissed faces full of naive hope. The worn armchair where he sat every evening, reading his books while I read mine. These were artifacts of a life I wasn't sure existed anymore. Slowly, I stood up and walked to the large mirror in the hallway. I looked at myself. Really looked. My makeup was smeared, my eyes were red and puffy, and my hair was escaping its elegant arrangement. I was not a vision of beauty, but for the first time I didn't see my flaws. I saw the woman who had stood up in a room full of people and spoken her truth. I saw the woman who had refused to be diminished, who had demanded to be seen. The tremor of fear from that moment was gone, replaced by a deep, quiet strength I had never felt before. My toast had not been for the audience, or for Mark, or even for Chloe. It had been for me. It was a declaration of my own worth. I went to bed, but I didn't sleep. I lay there and thought about love, about beauty, about the promises we make. Mark's words had been a betrayal, but perhaps the deeper betrayal had been my own. For years, I had allowed my sense of self-worth to be tangled up in his perception of me. I had relied on his gaze to feel beautiful, his approval to feel secure. His careless whisper had shattered that illusion, and as painful as it was, it had also set me free. The sun rose the next morning, casting long, pale fingers of light across the bedroom floor. I felt exhausted, but also strangely calm. The path forward was uncertain. I didn't know if our marriage could be saved, or if it even should be. Forgiveness was a distant country I wasn't sure how to travel to. Gluing the pieces of our shattered trust back together would require more than just an apology. It would require him to truly understand the wound he had inflicted, and it would require me to learn to trust again, not just in him, but in myself. I got out of bed and walked back to that same mirror. The morning light was less forgiving, but I didn't shy away from it. I saw my tired eyes, my pale skin, but I also saw the unwavering resolve in my gaze. The woman looking back at me was not a victim. She was a survivor. She was a woman who had found her voice in the most painful of moments and had discovered a beauty within herself that had nothing to do with a man's fleeting admiration. It was a beauty forged in fire, and it was a beauty that no one could ever take away. The future was unknown, but for the first time in a long time, I knew with absolute certainty that I was going to be okay.